Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video, I want to give you guys my review, my thoughts here on the Cursed City of Sintranos. At the time of recording, I'm a good bit of the way through the first rotation. We still have a few random stages to sort of clear up along the way, but we've done all the major ones over there. And at the moment, I'm sort of hard stuck in Soul Cross on a few stages that are going to take a ton of work to get through, and I'm planning to get back to those after Christmas. You guys know where we are. In fact, I have cleared out a bunch of these stages by the time you watch this video, just preparing a couple of vids for over Christmas. But what is interesting about this and why I want to make this video is I had a very unique opportunity to actually talk with some of the developers alongside some other content creators at Plarium. Now, it wasn't like an interview to do videos on any of the information for you. It's more sort of getting to know them and getting some insight into their design process, how they're feeling about the game and that sort of stuff. Certainly one of the interesting takeaways from this was I felt like they were maybe a little bit pleasantly surprised by how positive the reaction has been to the Cursed City of Sintranos. And they also seemed extremely open-minded about where this content is going in the future. Like, they seem pretty open to rebalancing stuff, to moving stuff around, to switching bosses. Yeah, it kind of seemed like, actually, honestly, just based off of community feedback, that they'd be willing to change almost anything about this. So that's sort of why I want to give my take, and why I think it's also useful to get your take as well. So it also seems that they pay a lot of attention to the YouTube community. It's only one part of the community, of course, one particular section of the player base, but they do, it seems, really check up on that and how we're feeling. Now, I put out a few polls tied in with this, at least somewhat. One was before the whole interview even started, and I was curious about what your favorite content was this year. And really, overwhelmingly, the Cursed City of Sintranos really won that vote. So I did a follow-up video yesterday about how you feel about the Cursed City so far, and over half of respondents saying that they're enjoying it overall. It means it's not quite perfect, but they're having a good time. It's a positive experience. 13% absolutely love it. 7% haven't played it yet. 22% have found it too difficult, and then 4% have some other feelings about it. But just sort of building off the comments that I've seen so far, I think the biggest concern, broadly speaking, is that it's too difficult. There's also, I think, a little bit of a concern in terms of, I've seen some community members feeling like it is recycled content, like just recycled Doom Tower, etc. So let's unpack those a little bit. Do I feel like it's recycled or lazy content? Do I feel like it is too difficult? Or, I guess, do I also feel like it's too easy? Too easy, too difficult? How do I feel about that? So in terms of it being lazy or recycled content, I actually don't feel that. Personally, I'm on the side of actually really enjoying this content. I think it has been particularly good on hard difficulty. It's been really fun to come in and have these restrictions and be like, okay, well, only with force and attack champions from only these factions can I build a team to take down these particular waves. I actually really enjoy that. I'm the type of player, I like having a lot of champions. I like to collect and go in and to blast it out. It is certainly very similar. This gives me a very similar vibe, this content, to Doom Tower, sort of mixed with Faction Wars, I suppose. And certainly a lot of the bosses are Doom Tower or the dungeon bosses. Fighting them again, there's no question. I feel that the double bosses are actually really cool. That's super awesome, and they've been, generally speaking, really enjoyable challenges, and fairly doable, the ones I've done so far. Now, there's two I haven't done, and they could be pretty tough for sure. I haven't been able to get to them yet, but I've really enjoyed the double bosses, and I think that's actually a really unique twist, a really unique spin on the mechanic, and I totally don't mind that at all. Then repeating the bosses, sort of the more individual bosses, I think that's been pretty enjoyable too, honestly. I think it's been pretty fun, like doing the Eternal Dragon with these restrictions, that's been pretty fun. I think it's been a pretty big success. So I actually totally don't mind. Honestly, going into this content, I was a bit worried about that, about the bosses and stuff being recycled. But for me, it actually doesn't bother me. When it comes to difficulty, I think this is a really interesting debate. Like I see comments saying, a lot of the difficulty is just the champions that you own. That's the game, though, isn't it? Like that is the game. I think there's sort of three varieties of difficulty in Raid Shadow Legends. Number one, how many champions do you own, which comes from playing the game for a long time and or spending money. Number two, it's how much gear do you have, which again comes from playing the game for a long time and or spending money. And number three is skill. Right. So skill, putting those things together, building the right teams, using resources efficiently and stuff like that. Again, part of that comes from playing the game for a long time. You know, some players totally just pay people to play their accounts, so there is an aspect of for sure, you know, spending money for skill. But broadly speaking, you know, that is more broad. The problem with skill as being, if that is the main difficulty thing, like I'm saying this as someone, I feel like I'm pretty good at the game. I don't know exactly how I'd rank myself, like probably top 10%, maybe higher. I don't know. I certainly think there are players that are better than me and that will absolutely like go in and really crunch the numbers and come up with really creative stuff. And I feel like I come up with creative stuff sometimes, but like I feel like there's players that blow me out of the water in that sense, you know. But, you know, I think I do pretty well if it was just purely skill. Like, I think it'd be kind of cool if they said, okay, bam, here's like Nightmare City of Sintranos. You've got like all the champions are pre-built and it's just sort of solve the puzzle. I'd love that personally, like purely a skill-based thing. That'd be cool. But I think that's also not for everyone because there's something to be said for the accessibility there that, you know, in terms of collecting champions, collecting gear, it's not actually like difficult on a skill level, right? If it just involves time in the game, it means it's open to everyone, right? Even if you're not a particularly amazing gamer, right? You don't have crazy reflexes, you're not really creative, you can still go in and you can succeed and genuinely feel like you've accomplished something because, you know, it's about the time, it's about the grind and persistence. And I think that's actually really valuable too. You know, like our super competitive MOBAs, like the best game, not for everyone. So that's sort of how I feel about that. Difficulty in this game, I feel, is a pretty complicated thing. I feel like this has struck, honestly, a pretty good balance. Everything is important. Gear is important. Champions are important. And then, you know, skill, building them up, approaching it has been important as well. I think it's ticked all the boxes. Honestly, it's done a pretty good job of involving everything. I will say one thing that is a bit weird for sure is certainly on hard difficult. If we compare it to Doom Tower, let's say, I think it's a pretty good comparison. Like Cobble Market is probably, it's hard exactly for me to judge, right? Because, you know, when I did Doom Tower normal, that was at a different point in my account. But like comparing how easy it is to farm Cobble Market compared to even farming Doom Tower normal, I'd say Cobble Market on hard is possibly as easy as Doom Tower normal, if not maybe even easier. But then we come up to Soul Cross. Soul Cross is easily as hard as Doom Tower hard, like the top end of Doom Tower hard. And realistically, it's probably harder than Doom Tower hard. So you know, it's a really broad range of difficulty. Whereas in Doom Tower normal, you have normal, which sort of scales fairly steadily up. Then it moves into hard, and hard kind of starts harder than normal Doom Tower, and it scales fairly steadily up. Like normal through hard Doom Tower is a fairly linear increase in difficulty. There's actually weirdly some parts where some levels are kind of harder earlier on, then it gets a bit easier, and so on and so forth. But it's a fairly linear scaling. I will say this stuff is really weird. Like Cobble Market is probably too easy. Soul Cross, considering that we know there's more difficulties potentially coming, Soul Cross is potentially too hard. Like I look at, this is the notorious level, right? Stage 19 of Soul Cross, where you have to beat waves like this: Double Harima, Yumiko, Jingwan, and a Karato, and you can only use Spirit, Rare, and Epic champions. I've been loving this fact that only one player in the entire world has beaten this. You know, if there's supposed to be a difficulty beyond this, how can you really make that more challenging? Like, this seems pretty capped out in terms of difficulty. That might not be true, you know? It might be one of those things that give this another couple of weeks, and suddenly there's going to be a whole lot of teams, a whole lot of strategies that it just requires actually just coming upon the right strategy for some of this stuff. Like you can see it with Hydra Clash, how much those teams develop like over a few weeks. So we're still pretty early on in the Cursed City, but I will say it does still seem to me that it's hard to make some of these levels of Soul Cross harder without being almost unbeatable. I think it's certainly hard to make them harder without making them extremely unfun as well. Like you can come in and you can beat a stage, you know, without like with good builds, but without like going absolutely crazy. You can get away with some stuff. Like for me, I remember we did this stage with 6-star Talia, right? Which is a big thing, but like it's not the most insane gearing. Like you could probably make these stages so difficult that it's like you just need absolutely tons of stun sets. Like some of the Doom Tower secret rooms in hard and rotation 2 especially are pretty obnoxious. They're rare only, where it's like you can only use rare champions, and rare champions suck. So it's really just about a bunch of champions in stun sets, right, with fearsome presence, and you just have to run it over and over and over and over again till you get really good luck. Like that's extremely hard. But is it fun? I don't think so. So I don't know how you make Soul Cross that much harder while still keeping it fun. It seems fairly at the limit for me. So yeah, I'm curious where they would go. Like I think with hard difficulty here, like I hardly see them making Cobble Market hard. I don't think making anything harder is the right path. I think that frustrates players, right? That, well, I beat this in month 1, now it's way harder in month 2. Like what the heck, I've made backwards progress. I think that's not something you want to do. I could totally see them bringing out like a brutal difficulty and being like, yo, okay, you know what, we're gonna tone Soul Cross down a bit, maybe even the sides down. Like we're gonna tone everything down a little bit on hard, that make that more accessible, and we'll add maybe a brutal, maybe add a nightmare, and sort of smooth out the power curve, as it were, a little bit. I could totally see that as being something that happens, but I don't know. That's just some thoughts from me in terms of that. I will say I would probably prefer as well potentially a few more paths through. Like for example, I think coming into Soul Cross, there's quite a lot of choke points. It might be more interesting if there are a few more paths through. So for example, like getting hard blocked by Sand Devil, for instance, which you guys know is a boss I don't really like. But you could potentially get hard blocked by Sand Devil, and that's really nearly all of Soul Cross that's blocked off from you. You can't get through. A few more paths through might be kind of cool. I think they've, generally speaking, done a fairly good job overall, where there are a multitude of paths, lots of different options, and I think that's quite enjoyable. Sort of choose your own path, choose your own adventure through, skip the floors that you're stuck on and come back later. I think good variety is good. Maybe a couple too many choke points, but not horrendously awful. Like over here, you could probably have S4 linked to S6, for example, and you could skip Iron Twins and come back. That probably wouldn't be terrible. Maybe S2 could jump over to S90. I don't know. Like there could be maybe some more options there for getting through. Perhaps. So I don't feel too strongly about it. I mean, one thing I'm definitely critical of is this quest thing. I think this is kind of silly. Like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, fairly realistically, I'm going to clear out of 100 stages. I think fairly realistically might clear 90. Like let's say I get stuck, can't beat these. If I do 90 out of 100, like 90% of the content, I'm actually only going to get 45% of the candles, right? They're almost entirely locked off. Over half of them are locked off behind fully clearing the map. That's kind of silly. Like, you know, I go at that point, you could just give us a candle per stage and I'd be way better off. Like, what is the advantage of this quest system? They're pretty boring, let's be honest. It just seems a bit shit. Like, it'd be cool if there were interesting quests, right? If the quests mixed up every month, that'd be quite fun. If they were like challenges, like, I don't know, beats 10 stages in, I don't know, 5 turns or less or something, you know, like fun quests, fun little challenges, that could be quite cool. And I'd be like, okay with that. But yeah, I'm not a massive fan of this. Again, it doesn't make or break the content, but it is a little bit silly. It is a bit silly. Amius the Lunar Archon himself, I thought that was quite a fun boss. I'm interested to see what happens with him in the future for sure. But I thought it was cool, and I liked the idea that it was quite a manual focused boss. Like, I think building a full auto team for Amius seems very, very difficult, but because it is something that you do once per month, which is very rare, right? sort of equal to, again, very similar to Doom Tower, perhaps beating a Doom Tower boss the first time. But even with Doom Tower bosses, oftentimes, like with Dark Fae, you want to farm the hardest Dark Fae, for instance. Often with Doom Tower, you do want to be farming the top stage of Doom Tower hard possible. So you need a bit of an auto team. You need it to be repeatable. With Amius, it's like, just beat him once and you're done. And I think that's actually really good. I really like that about this, that there's no farming in this mode. It's just go in and do it once per month, and then you can come back next month and do it again. Perhaps that's part of where this being easier is good as well. Like the new month starts off, and yeah, it should be pretty easy to re-clear a lot of it, and you'll have some struggle, but for the most part, you know, you'll probably get pretty similar progress each month. You know what you're going to get, and it starts off fairly straightforward. Like, I think that works quite well. So that's sort of a thing to consider, I guess, on the difficulty too. Like, I don't know. Eventually, maybe it would be cool to have maybe even like a challenge mode where it's like beat it once and it doesn't reset, but like just make every single level like as hard as the hardest soul cross, like ridiculously hard. Every level, every boss that hard, but you only have to do it one time. That could be kind of a fun once-off challenge. But I don't know. That'd be a different thing as well. But broadly speaking, honestly, I love this content. I think it's been super fun. I think it's come through in my videos as well. That yeah, it's great. It makes a lot more champions a lot more relevant, which is fantastic. I'm really excited to see what happens with the rotations, to see, again, even more champions come in and go, oh, that champion, I never really considered them before, like this epic or this legendary, whatever. Suddenly they can come in and be super good. Like, for instance, like I know on this stage, no, wait, it's not this one that I'm stuck on. Is it S20 maybe? Yeah, S20 that I'm stuck on, right? And going, Killian the Lucky, right? Killian the Lucky is showing up quite a bit in here, like a bunch of Killian the Lucky is showing up. It's like, that's not a champion people really talk about much, but he's showing up a bunch and being really useful. Or Danek Skullreap, again, a champion people don't really pay too much attention to. And hey, he's coming in and having some success. That's actually quite cool. That's quite fun. I like that. And that'd be fun to see in further rotations. So yeah, anyway, my main hope would be that if they add more difficulties, but potentially, I do think that there's some areas in Soul Cross, particularly, that might need to be perhaps tuned down a little bit. Some bosses are just going to be a little bit frustrating. I think Scarab boss is one that stood out as being a fairly frustrating boss that is quite reliant on blood shield accessories. That can be quite annoying because there just might not be a shield champion in the pool. That's a bit frustrating. So yeah, one also thing I have heard is that maybe Amius on normal difficulty is a bit too difficult. So that's something to watch out for. But at a quick glance of normal, I've not done normal, and my account has obviously progressed much more further than it would be with normal. But looking at Soul Cross at least, which is the part that I find difficult on hard, coming in on normal, you've got like a much broader range of champions that are usable. Right, the restrictions are much less for Soul Cross, so I think that's a good way to do it. But I'm very curious what they do with more difficulties of this. Very, very curious. But for me, for now, lots of great rewards, lots of fun challenges. Get to use all three areas of difficulty: collecting champions, collecting gear, and skill. I think they all factor in a pretty fun way. So for me, broadly speaking, I think it's a pretty big win. Like, I'd probably be taking the I love it box myself quite confidently, of being like, yeah, this content has been great. I think it's really, really good. It feels very much like a Doom Tower 2.0 to me. Very much like that, which it certainly can be frustrating, but on the whole, can give you a great sense of achievement. It's a big goal to like progress through, to work towards long-term goals. Makes a ton of champions more viable, which is essential really in a game which is really at its core about collecting champions. That's a pretty big win. There are my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think down below. I'm sure I forgot to talk about some stuff. You can let me know if that's the case, but thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.